Hey everyone, welcome back to the Million Dollar Nonprofit Podcast. Today we're talking about one of the biggest questions you need to ask before even starting a nonprofit. And that question is, should I start one at all? I'm talking with Emily Gaylor, a nonprofit consultant and guidance expert who helps founders build strong foundations and long-term success. We'll cover everything from assessing the real need of your organization, clarifying your mission, and testing your motive to set up the right board that actually holds you accountable. If you're thinking about launching a nonprofit or you're in the early stages of starting one, this episode is full of practical insights to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and set up to succeed. Emily, thank you so much for being on this episode of the Million Dollar Nonprofit Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, today we are talking about one of the main questions before you even start a nonprofit is, should I start a nonprofit? So this episode is going to be great because we're going to kind of take a step back, and this is going to be for all of the listeners that are thinking about starting a nonprofit, or maybe they've done a lot of research and they're just about to register their organization. And this episode is going to be for you so that you know, hey, am I doing this for the right reasons and should I keep moving forward? And Emily, I know you work with a lot of nonprofits in helping them get started and really just helping them to identify what is the real reason that you're starting this nonprofit. So I'm excited to unpack that with you and all of our listeners that are thinking about starting an organization. This episode is going to be for you. So Emily, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to just dive right in with my first question is, there are over 1 million nonprofits that are currently registered. What are some critical assessments that a person or an organization should come to before forming and actually registering their nonprofit?
And I wouldn't say assessments. I would say there are tasks that need to be done. First and foremost, you need to clarify the problem. Define the problem in concrete terms. Because if you can't do this, the first basic step, you're not going to be able to identify the problem to potential program participants or even to potential funders. I have to identify who is affected by the problem and then map what they need and how you know they need it. Second is confirm the need for a new organization. Sit down, list every group you have, do the research that is currently working on the same issue, review their programs and their budgets and their geographic coverage, and identify gaps in services that are real and not just perceived by you, and ask whether or not these gaps could be filled by supporting an existing group. Uh, you know, and it's so important now that you reach out to the community during this kind of stage and validate the need from the community and those who you are even thinking about serving. Um, ask the target community what support that they want, not just the services that you want or you perceive that they need. Record the priorities and compare them to your idea that you have in mind, and identify where your ideas are in alignment and where they're not. Next is you need to assess your unique value within this nonprofit space. State the specific outcomes you plan to produce, and why is your approach different from what already exists. But it's paramount at this point that you test whether or not your differences lead to better outcomes and not just your own personal preference. You need to create a credible business model. Do your projections with a 1 year budget with real numbers. Identify potential funders with alignment of interest, and confirm whether or not your mission is fundable just beyond the startup enthusiasm. And it's the kind of the whether or not the earned revenue fits the mission and the market stage. Um, and kind of you're flying the plane as you build it right here, but you really need to begin to think about the leadership capacity, for governance and finance, legal compliance, things like this, and begin to identify and match to those people who are willing to serve, and confirm above and beyond all else who will manage operations on day one of that, or of the start. Um, I think you need to test for long-term viability, estimate 3-year financial market needs, identify the systems, financial control. But the last step I always urge my clients to do is examine your motive. Write down why you want to launch this nonprofit and whether or not the motive is service, ego, frustration with the current existing groups, or a belief that you can do it better. And confirm that your motive aligns with community interest and long term responsibility.
What do you think could be some of the issues of starting a nonprofit that you're really just wanting to start it for, hey, ego or some other, I guess, purpose that, I guess, isn't there long term, right? If you have no specific strategy for growth or large impact, I mean, could this potentially, if you started a nonprofit with, I don't want to say the word half assed, but that
Yeah.
was a word that my father always used to say, don't half ass things when I was growing up. But I could see this taking away a lot of resources from the current nonprofits in the community that are actually doing really good. Because if you start one up and start pulling away funding that would normally go to an organization that's more established, that could potentially hurt the community that you're trying to help.
Absolutely. And I find unfortunately that a lot of this has to do with ego and and people, to quote you, half-ass this all the time because there's that bias on their part that either they can do it better or that the currently existing nonprofits aren't doing a good enough job, or they aren't providing the services that they needed. And so that's why that gap analysis and finding those gaps in services, and whether it comes to services, programs, geographic area, or even who you serve, that's why it's so important for you to nail that down so you make sure that you're not duplicating those services.
Yeah, and I think you made a point earlier that instead of starting a nonprofit, maybe it would be better to just help support a nonprofit that's already established. How can a potential founder kind of separate the desire to like do good from feel good when launching an organization and making that that choice of, hey, I think I could do it better and this is how I'm going to do this long term, or maybe I just want to help support an organization and be a volunteer or a fundraiser or just be more involved with one that's already existing.
Yeah, I think the litmus test for this is, look for existing groups that are currently doing similar work. And if their first instinct is to, collaborate, strengthen, or join what already exists, you're aligned with impact. And if your instinct is to create something new so you can lead it, you're chasing identity. So that's the litmus test that I use when it comes to this. And, a good one is, do you want your name on this? Why do you think you can do better than the existing organizations who are currently in the trenches doing the work?
When you're talking with one of your clients and helping to determine whether this is something that they actually truly desire and they want to pursue, what are some of the traits or answers that they give you as why they're starting an organization that you feel is like, yep, okay, they got it, they're going to be successful, they know what they're doing, compared to the ones that when you're talking to them, you're like, okay, maybe this is not the right fit for you.
As horrible as it sounds, if they give a personal story on how they were affected, of this, whatever is this, whatever they're starting the nonprofit for, beyond doing the research on who is already providing those services, that is really a red flag to me because that shows more ego than it does collaboration. Um, you know, a lot of these smaller nonprofits are essentially small business and mom and pop shops who, they encountered a problem and we're all honesty didn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to do the research that it takes in order to really launch a successful nonprofit. And so those, I hate to say, lazier people or the lazier organizations aren't going to survive because their programs are duplicative and they're taking away money from, real organizations that are doing the work. But a lot of the problems I find is that they get in there and they even start to do the IRS paperwork, and that's a huge burden to them. Sometimes they'll pull out, sometimes they'll double down, um, and finish the paperwork. But always keep the nonprofit on a back burner instead of making it a full-time project.
What do you think of a founder that has a full-time job and they're starting this nonprofit as kind of like a second job? Do you see that happen quite often? Is it recommended to begin with, but have an exit plan from your full-time job to go full-time at the organization, the nonprofit? What have you seen with working with all of your customers?
I think, I think they need to check their willingness to do unglamorous work. Because a lot of times, running a nonprofit, it's administration, compliance, fundraising, audits, and accountability. And that oftentimes takes more time than they really have. Um, you know, I see a lot of these people just out of the goodness of their heart, working 8, 9 hours a day and then coming home and trying to run these nonprofits full time. And I think the bandwidth and the toll it takes on the person, whether or not they can do it. It's hard. Nonprofit work is hard work, and you really need to find somebody dedicated to that initially who can work more than 3 or 4 hours a night.
Yeah, it's true because it doesn't just take a toll on you, it takes a toll on everybody related to you or around you, right? Your family, your kids, your spouse. When you are trying to work a full-time job and then even utilizing some of that money to help fund your nonprofit because nonprofits is a lot of work, and usually at the beginning there's no money coming in. You have to work hard to bring that in, so there's a lot of things to think about, even before starting a nonprofit, that it doesn't just affect you but a lot of people around you also.
Exactly. And unfortunately, your paycheck nowadays, not a whole lot of people can say that their paycheck really supports them and their family. So, you really have to take a step back and say, is this sustainable? Because my nonprofit can't support myself and my family right now, and it cannot be a source of revenue for anything else.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think about um, nonprofit founders taking a salary and growing their nonprofit so that they can pay themselves a full-time salary to supplement the income from having, so that they can leave their full-time job?
Initially I would like to see that done on a very formal contract basis. Um, Not just, a salary offhand. I think this is where it comes in very handy to have a board of directors that aren't your friends and family, who really hold you accountable to do the work and to deliver the deliverables at the end of the day.
Do you find that when you're talking with somebody that's forming a new nonprofit, that their board is usually friends and family?
99.9% of the time.
Yeah. And I could see that being a huge conflict of interest right off the bat because you did make a good point of you do need, if you really want this to be successful, you need outside opinions that aren't just there to be nice and say, oh, you're doing a great job. Oh, yes, pay yourself, whatever. But, having outside people that are holding you accountable to actually growth and getting results.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to something like this, I always tell my clients to, follow Abraham Lincoln's lead and form a cabinet of rivals. I want people on that board who aren't afraid to push back and tell somebody no, who have contradictory opinions and different points of view, because that's what it takes to really run a successful nonprofit. Those different point of views that can give me insight to where I have blind spots and can tell me no at the end of the day when they think I'm unreasonable, because my mom and dad aren't going to tell me that.
Yep. Yeah, and I could see it just a lot of failures in nonprofits that close down is because the board is mostly family and friends that won't push back to the founder. Everybody loves the fact that somebody's starting a business or starting a nonprofit, and you're taking the lead of the CEO role of that venture, and everybody just wants to be part of it, right? All your friends and family. But that's not always a good business decision if you're looking to grow long term and create something that's valuable.
No, absolutely. And these people don't think that at the end of the day, they're on the board of directors of a nonprofit and they're fiscally responsible for the nonprofits. So a lot of these, and they don't know that they've signed up for something that they're fiscally responsible for because the founder doesn't have the training to really relay that to the board.
Yeah. How long do you think it takes for a new nonprofit founder from the day that they incorporate to really kind of figure out a lot of that, I guess, technical knowledge of how the board of directors should operate and what they should be responsible for?
I would say, it depends on the nonprofit support system in their community. There's always trainings and, that may be financially burdensome, but you can always get free trainings to help you set the structure and the cadence of the board. And it's really how much work is the founder willing to do to learn that information.
Yeah, and with the nonprofits that you work with, when forming their nonprofits and helping them grow and succeed, what are some of the things that you help them with to kind of lessen the gap so that they can be successful earlier on?
Yeah, I a lot of times I do board trainings. I'm a board source certified governance trainer, so I do a lot of trainings in governance, ethics, accountability, board structure, and things like that. I write a lot of policies when it comes to. The board and the policies of the organization. So that's a lot of the work that I currently do. I'm a strong believer of if you have a strong foundation, you'll have a strong springboard, and so my goal is to really give these organizations a really strong foundation so they can springboard to success.
I love that. And if for someone listening right now that's planning on incorporating a nonprofit tomorrow, what's that one hard question that they must answer before they think about moving forward and registering?
Why should you even exist? As harsh as that sounds, that's the question that, not only they need to be able to answer, but the people around them need to be able to answer. Because if I'm a funder, I want to be able to have them come up with a concrete answer to that. Tell me why you exist. Tell me what problem you're trying to solve. Tell me, did you do your gap analysis and make sure that you're not duplicating any services to take money away from those organizations that at the end of the day that are doing it better. No one needs to have a save the spotted owls in area code 73003. Um, and that's a harsh reality of the nonprofits that I think that's when ego comes to play and that founderitis and I dare say even narcissism um, in terms of, that this nonprofit atmosphere.
When you bring on a new client, what are some of the first things that you go through when you start working with them? If you find that they're answering the right questions, they know why they should exist, and you feel that they are going to make an impact in the world, what are some of the next steps that you help them with to make sure that their nonprofit becomes successful?
I always first and foremost train the board because those are going to be, your champions out in the community. They're the ones going to be doing the United Way speaking tour, as I call it. Second, you have to have those policies and procedures in place. If I hate to say this, but what if like the KKK comes and wants to give you a donation? Do you have a policy to step back and say no, we can't take that? So you at the end of the day, you really want them to have the empowerment to cover their rear end at the end of the day. I always look for, I don't care if the revenue is, growing by 100 times. Is the revenue steadily increasing every year? Uh, is the board invested? Is the founder invested? What's the motivation for this at the end of the day? And is there a succession plan and an emergency succession plan that, if God forbid anything happens to the founder, that operations would be able to continue?
Mm. That's great. Great information right there. And Emily, if anybody is thinking about starting an organization today, how can they reach out to you to get to get into your world, get you to help them, so that they can have and lay this foundation correct the first time?
Absolutely. Reach out via email. My email is Emily, Emily, Gaylor, G as in George, Aylor at gmail.com.
All right. And are you on any type of social media, LinkedIn,
You can find
Facebook?
me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And in the show description below, we'll have a link to Emily's profile so everybody can reach out to her with answering that critical question of should you even exist? I love that. And Emily, I know that you're going to be able to help out a lot of our listeners that are thinking about getting that foundation set, and everybody wants to do good in the world, and they think that they have to do it themselves by forming a not their own nonprofit, but sometimes it's just supporting a nonprofit that's already existing in your community. But if you are looking to start your own nonprofit, reach out to Emily. She'll help you out. She'll at least help you answer that question on if we should even exist and if we should move forward. And if you decide that, yes, starting your own nonprofit is something that you are going to do and move forward with, Emily is the go-to person to help make sure that you do it the right way from the beginning, so that you can be long-term and successful with everything that you do. Emily, thank you so much for being on the $1 Million Nonprofit podcast today.
Thank you for having me.